The lawyer called it a $10 garage, but the German Shepherd reacted to one corner of the building as if it remembered something nobody else did. A rusted storage rack screeched across the concrete floor. Dust swirled through a beam of sunlight. Koda's claws scraped frantically at the wall while the old veteran froze, staring at a seam that shouldn't have been there. The brass key felt cold in his hand, and somewhere beyond the hidden door, something waited in complete silence. What do you think was hidden inside? The wind came down from the Absaroka Mountains carrying the first bite of Wyoming autumn. Ray Bennett sat behind the wheel of a faded RV parked beside a gravel turnout, overlooking miles of yellow grass and dark pine ridges. The engine was off. The silence inside was broken only by the slow breathing of the German Shepherd stretched across the passenger seat. Koda lifted his head before the phone rang. The dog always seemed to know a second before anything happened. Ray glanced at the screen. A lawyer's office in Elk Ridge. He answered on the third ring. Mr. Bennett, this is Thomas Hale. We're ready for the reading of your uncle's will. Ray looked out at the mountains. Be there in an hour. He hung up. Koda was already watching him. Looks like we're going to town. The dog thumped his tail once. 45 minutes later, the RV rolled into Elk Ridge. The town sat in a shallow valley surrounded by timbered hills. Old brick storefronts lined Main Street. Pickup trucks filled the parking spaces. Nothing had changed much since Ray was a boy. The law office occupied the second floor of a building above a feed store. Ray climbed the stairs slowly. Old injuries announced themselves on damp mornings. Koda followed at his side. The receptionist looked up. The dog can't. Service animal? Hale interrupted from a doorway. The woman nodded. Ray entered the conference room. 3 people were already there. His cousin Brandon, Brandon's mother, Cheryl, and Cheryl's daughter, Melissa. The people who remembered family gatherings, but somehow never remembered hospital visits. Brandon smirked when he saw the RV keys hanging from Ray's belt. Nice to see you made it. Ray ignored him. He chose a chair facing the door. Old habits. Always know the exits. Koda settled beneath the table. Thomas Hale opened a folder. Your uncle, Edward Carson Bennett, left specific instructions regarding distribution. The room quieted. Cheryl received a rental property outside Cody. Melissa inherited an investment account. Brandon received 80 acres of grazing land. Every announcement brought smiles, occasional nods, little looks of satisfaction. Then Hale turned a page. And to Raymond Bennett. Brandon leaned back. Melissa folded her arms. The detached garage located on Willow Creek Road, parcel 22. Silence. Hale adjusted his glasses. The county appraisal lists the structure at $10. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brandon laughed, a sharp bark of amusement. $10? Melissa covered her mouth. Even Cheryl couldn't hide her smile. Uncle Eddie always did have a sense of humor. Ray looked down at the table. The grain in the wood reminded him of an old supply crate he'd once seen sitting in a staging area outside Mosul. Strange what memory chose to keep. That's it? Brandon asked. That's it, Hale replied. The laughter faded into scattered chuckles. Brandon shook his head. Man, you drove all the way here for a $10 garage. Nobody defended Ray. Nobody suggested it seemed unfair. Nobody mentioned that Ray had been the only one visiting Uncle Eddie during the last years. Nobody mentioned who drove him to appointments, who repaired his furnace, who brought groceries during winter storms. The room simply moved on, as if the matter were settled. Ray sat quietly. Koda remained under the table. Then the dog slowly raised his head. His ears pointed forward. Not toward Brandon, not toward the others, toward the lawyer. Hale closed the folder. But instead of standing, he reached into his desk drawer. His expression changed. Something careful. Something deliberate. Mr. Bennett. Ray looked up. Hale slid a small object across the table. An old brass key, worn smooth by decades of use. Brandon frowned. What's that? Hale ignored him. Your uncle instructed me to give this only to Raymond. The room grew still. Ray picked up the key. It felt heavier than it should have. The brass was warm from years of handling. On the head of the key were 3 tiny letters. E.C.B. Edward Carson Bennett, his uncle's initials. What does it open? Ray asked. Hale hesitated. He never told me. Brandon snorted. Probably the world's most valuable $10 garage. Nobody laughed this time, because Hale wasn't smiling. The lawyer leaned forward. Your uncle was very specific about one thing. Ray waited. Hale met his eyes. He said if anyone else asks about that garage, the lawyer glanced around the room. Tell them they already received what they came for. Something shifted in the air. Small, almost invisible. But Ray felt it. The same feeling he'd learned to trust years ago overseas. The feeling that something important sat just outside the edge of what everyone else could see. Brandon stood. Well, that's weird. Cheryl grabbed her purse. Melissa checked her phone. Within moments, they were filing out of the room discussing property taxes and travel plans. Not one of them looked back. Soon, only Ray, Koda, and the lawyer remained. Hale lowered his voice. Your uncle came here 3 weeks before he died. Ray listened. He spent nearly 2 hours talking about that garage. Why? I don't know, Hale looked toward the window. But I've done this job for 30 years. He paused. And I've never seen a man so determined that one specific person inherit one specific place. Ray stared at the brass key. Outside, a train horn echoed through the valley. Long, low, lonely. For a split second, the sound became something else. A warning siren. A radio call. A memory buried beneath desert dust. His shoulders tightened automatically. Then it passed. Wyoming returned. The lawyer stood. Good luck, Mr. Bennett, Ray nodded once. He slipped the key into his pocket. When he rose from the chair, Koda was already waiting beside him. Together they walked down the stairs. The afternoon sun hung low above the mountains. The town looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Yet somehow everything felt different. Ray stopped beside the RV. He pulled the brass key from his pocket one more time. Koda stared at it, then at the distant hills beyond town, then back at Ray, as if he already knew where they needed to go next. The garage, the $10 garage nobody wanted, and whatever waited behind a door that only one man had been trusted to open. Ray Bennett drove out of Elk Ridge with the brass key resting in the cup holder beside him. The mountains stretched across the horizon like dark waves frozen in place. Late afternoon sunlight spilled across the slopes, turning patches of aspen gold. Koda sat upright in the passenger seat, ears forward, watching the road, as if he understood the importance of the day. The garage could wait until morning. There were things Ray found himself thinking about instead. Things he hadn't allowed himself to think about during the reading of the will. The last 8 years. The years nobody else seemed interested in remembering. A gust of wind rattled the RV as it climbed a narrow mountain road toward the overlook where Ray often spent the night. He parked beneath a stand of lodgepole pines overlooking a valley streaked with fading sunlight. The engine ticked as it cooled. For a long moment, neither Ray nor Koda moved. Then Ray reached into the glove compartment. Inside was an old photograph. The edges were worn soft, Edward Bennett stood beside a woodpile wearing a flannel jacket and a grin he rarely showed in public. Much younger Ray stood beside him, and a puppy-sized Koda sat between them. The picture had been taken 7 years earlier, back when Uncle Eddie could still split his own firewood, back before arthritis twisted his hands, back before walking across a room became work. Ray stared at the photograph. "You sure knew how to keep secrets." Koda glanced toward him. The dog recognized the tone. Not sadness. Memory. The first snowstorm had arrived early that year. Ray remembered driving through 6 inches of fresh snow because Eddie hadn't answered his phone for 2 days. Most people would have waited. Ray hadn't. When he reached the cabin, he found the old man trying to drag a fallen pine branch off the roof, half frozen, too stubborn to ask for help. "You trying to kill yourself?" Ray had asked. Eddie looked up. "Probably not today." Then they spent 6 hours clearing snow. Neither man said much. They rarely did. Another memory followed. Spring rain hammering the roof, the old pickup loaded with bags of feed. Eddie sitting quietly during a doctor's appointment while younger patients complained about waiting. Ray driving, always driving, sometimes 50 miles, sometimes 100, because somebody had to. The strange thing was that Eddie never asked, not once, and Ray never offered explanations. He simply showed up, again and again, the way soldiers learn to show up for each other, the way people do when words aren't enough. One winter afternoon, after a cardiology appointment in Koda, they had stopped at a diner overlooking the river. The waitress knew Eddie by name. Coffee appeared before either man ordered. Outside, snow drifted against the windows. Inside, Eddie stirred his coffee. "You know what happens to old men?" Ray looked up. No. People stop seeing them. The spoon clinked softly against ceramic. "They don't mean to. They just do." Ray said nothing. Eddie took a sip. "Most people disappear long before the funeral." The old man smiled slightly. "You're still here." Ray shrugged. "You'd do the same." Eddie laughed once. A short sound. Then neither of them spoke for several minutes. The memory lingered. Ray folded the photograph and returned it to the glove compartment. Darkness settled over the mountains. The temperature dropped quickly. Inside the RV, he heated a can of beef stew while Koda waited patiently beside the table. Later, the dog curled up on his blanket near the door. Ray stretched out on the narrow bed. The brass key rested on the nightstand. Moonlight filtered through the window. For a while, there was only silence. Then clang. Metal struck metal somewhere outside. Ray's eyes opened instantly. His body reacted before his mind caught up. He was sitting upright before he fully woke, heart hammering, hand already reaching beneath the pillow. The darkness wasn't Wyoming, not at first. For one fractured second, it became something else, a dusty compound, a midnight watch rotation, the distant thump of rotor blades, the crackle of a radio, movement near a perimeter fence. Contact possible. Stay alert. Then reality returned. The RV, the mountains, the smell of pine. Koda was already standing, not barking, just watching the door, waiting. Ray listened. Another metallic rattle, a trash can rolling in the wind. Nothing more. He let out a slow breath. The dog remained alert another minute before finally settling down again. Ray rubbed his eyes. Sleep wouldn't come easily after that. It rarely did. At 3:17 in the morning, he was still awake. At 4, he finally drifted off. By 6, he was making coffee. Dawn painted the eastern sky pale orange. Koda stood beside the RV before Ray even opened the door. Ready. Waiting. The brass key disappeared into Ray's jacket pocket. He finished his coffee, started the engine, and pointed the RV toward Willow Creek Road. Toward the garage nobody wanted. Toward the place his uncle had protected for years. Toward a secret hidden behind a $10 appraisal. Neither Ray nor Koda knew it yet. But before the day was over, one of them would notice something everyone else had missed. The RV rolled off the highway and onto Willow Creek Road just after sunrise. A thin layer of frost still covered the grass. The mountains stood silent beneath a pale blue sky. Ray drove slowly. The road narrowed with every mile. Old fence posts leaned at odd angles. Cottonwoods lined a dry creek bed. Several abandoned buildings appeared in the distance, remnants of a town that had once expected a future and never found one. Koda sat upright beside him, watching, always watching. The GPS had lost signal 10 minutes earlier. Ray wasn't surprised. Places like this existed all over Wyoming, forgotten corners where people came to disappear or be forgotten. A rusted mailbox appeared beside the road. The numbers were barely visible. Ray slowed. Ahead stood the garage. For a long moment he simply stared. The building looked worse than he had imagined. Gray cinder blocks, flat roof, rust bleeding down from old metal gutters. Weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete. One of the windows had been boarded over years ago. The entire place looked abandoned, like something waiting for demolition. So this is what $10 buys. Koda jumped down first. His paws landed softly on the gravel. The dog immediately began scanning the area, nose working, ears moving. Ray noticed the behavior. Koda wasn't excited. He wasn't curious. He was assessing. The same way Ray assessed a new location. Old instincts often recognized each other. Ray walked to the padlocked door. The brass key slid smoothly into the lock. A click echoed in the morning silence. The door rolled upward with a groan. Dust drifted through sunlight. The smell hit first. Old wood, machine oil, dry air. The smell of a place untouched for years. Ray waited, listening. No movement. No animals. No loose metal rattling. Nothing. Then he stepped inside. The garage wasn't large. Maybe 20 feet wide, 30 feet deep. A heavy workbench occupied one wall. Old tools hung from pegboard. A stack of lumber rested near the back. Everything wore a layer of dust, not thick enough to suggest decades, just enough to suggest absence. Ray moved slowly through the room. His eyes traveled automatically from corner to corner. Windows, roofline, possible entrances, possible exits. Clear. The habit never left. Not after Iraq. Not after years spent entering places that looked harmless until they weren't. Koda followed him halfway inside, then stopped. Ray continued examining the workbench. There were hand planes, wood chisels, a miter saw older than most people working in hardware stores. Whoever owned these tools had cared for them. Even now they showed little rust. That didn't fit the rest of the building. Something about it bothered him. He couldn't explain why. A small framed photograph sat on a shelf. Ray picked it up. His uncle stood beside a younger version of himself, both smiling. Behind them stood the same garage, the same walls, the same roof, but somehow different. Cleaner. Alive. Ray brushed dust from the frame. His uncle had spent a lot of time here, far more than anyone knew. Outside, a train horn echoed across the valley. The sound rolled through the open doorway. For an instant, Ray saw desert sunlight, brown uniforms, a convoy moving across broken ground, a radio crackling. Then the memory vanished. He blinked. Back in Wyoming. Back in the garage. Koda suddenly made a low sound. Not a bark. Not a growl. Something in between. Ray turned. The dog wasn't looking at him. He wasn't looking at the door either. He was staring toward the rear wall, completely still. Ray watched. Koda's ears lifted higher. The dog took 2 slow steps forward, stopped, stared. The wall itself looked ordinary. Concrete blocks, paint peeling in places, nothing unusual. Ray waited. Koda moved again. Slowly. Purposefully. The way he behaved when tracking something. "What is it, boy?" No response. The dog reached the far end of the garage, near a tall wooden storage rack loaded with old boards. There he froze, tail rigid, head tilted slightly. His nose worked the air. Again. 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 Ray walked over. He studied the wall. Nothing. No cracks. No markings. No doors. Just concrete. Koda stepped closer. His attention locked onto the bottom corner of the storage rack. Ray crouched beside him. The dog touched the wood with his nose, then looked back at Ray. 1 second. 2. As if waiting. "What are you trying to tell me?" Koda pawed the ground. Once. Twice. Then suddenly he began scratching at the base of the rack. Not playing. Not digging. Working. The sharp scrape of claws echoed through the garage. Ray stared. The dog had never behaved like this without reason. Not once. Koda scratched again, and again. Something deep inside Ray shifted, the same instinct that had kept him alive overseas, the feeling that a detail everyone else ignored might change everything. Slowly he stood, then wrapped both hands around the side of the heavy storage rack. The wood groaned. Dust fell from above. And for the first time in years, Ray Bennett felt genuinely curious about what might be waiting on the other side. Koda scratched once more. Harder this time, as if he already knew. The scratching stopped. Silence settled over the garage. Ray kept both hands on the wooden storage rack. The thing weighed several hundred pounds at least. Decades-old lumber filled every shelf from top to bottom. Most men his age would have walked away. Most men would have assumed the dog was chasing a mouse. But Koda wasn't most dogs, and Ray wasn't most men. Overseas, he'd learned one lesson that never left him. Pay attention to what doesn't fit. The storage rack didn't fit. The tools had been organized. The lock on the front door had been maintained. The garage had looked abandoned, but not neglected. And now Koda was acting like there was something behind the wall. Ray braced one boot against the concrete floor, then pushed. Nothing. The rack groaned but didn't move. Dust drifted from the top shelf. Koda stepped back, watching, waiting. Ray repositioned himself and pushed again. This time the rack shifted, only an inch. But it moved. A scraping sound echoed through the garage. The old wood dragged across concrete. Ray stopped. His pulse had quickened. Not from effort, from anticipation. He grabbed the edge again, pushed harder. The rack slid another foot, then another, until a section of wall appeared behind it. Except it wasn't a wall. Not completely. A thin vertical seam ran from floor to ceiling. Perfectly straight. Too perfect. Ray stared. For several seconds, he didn't move. The seam had been painted the same color as the cinder blocks around it. Anyone walking into the garage would have missed it. Anyone except a German shepherd, apparently. Koda approached immediately. He sniffed the bottom edge, then looked up at Ray. The dog almost seemed pleased with himself. You found something, didn't you? Koda's tail gave a single slow wag. Ray stepped closer. The seam was barely visible. His fingers moved across the surface. Cold wood, not concrete. A concealed door. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Uncle Eddie standing beside a half-built shed years ago. If you're going to hide something, the old man had once said, don't hide it where people won't look. Hide it where they think they've already looked. At the time, Ray had assumed they were talking about tools. Now he wasn't so sure. His hand traveled downward. Near knee level, he found a tiny brass keyhole, almost invisible beneath old paint. Ray froze, then slowly reached into his pocket. The brass key. The key Thomas Hale had given him. The key nobody else received. For a moment, he simply held it. The morning sunlight streamed through the open garage door behind him. Dust floated through the beams of light. The entire room felt strangely still, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Ray inserted the key. Perfect fit. His heartbeat thudded once, twice. Then he turned it. A heavy click echoed inside the wall. Koda stepped back. The door shifted inward. A rush of cool air escaped from the darkness beyond. Not stale air. Not the smell of abandonment. Something else. Wood. Fresh wood. Linseed oil, sawdust. The scent hit Ray instantly. Someone had worked in that space. A lot. He pulled the door wider. Light spilled into the hidden room, and Ray Bennett forgot how to breathe. The space beyond was enormous, far larger than the garage itself, at least 3 times larger. His eyes traveled slowly across the room. Workbench, cabinets, shelving, professional woodworking equipment, dust collection pipes running along the ceiling, solar batteries mounted against one wall, everything immaculate, everything organized. Nothing abandoned. The hidden workshop looked as if its owner had simply stepped out for lunch. Koda entered first. His nails clicked softly across the wooden floor. Ray followed. The workshop stretched deep into the hillside behind the garage. A skylight high above filled the room with soft, natural light. Rows of handcrafted furniture stood throughout the space. Dining tables, rocking chairs, bookshelves, writing desks, bed frames, cabinets. Each piece looked better than anything he'd ever seen in a furniture store. Ray walked slowly toward the nearest table. His fingertips brushed the polished wood. Walnut, hand-finished, beautiful. Then he noticed something hanging from one corner. A small leather tag. He picked it up. The words were handwritten, simple, neat. For Ray. He stared, then looked at the next piece. Another tag. For Ray. A rocking chair. For Ray. A bookshelf. For Ray. A writing desk. For Ray. Everywhere he looked, the same words, the same message. For Ray. The room blurred slightly. He blinked, looked again. Nothing changed. His uncle had built all of this. For him, not one piece, not 2, an entire room, an entire life's work. Koda wandered between the furniture quietly, sniffing, exploring, as if making sure everything was safe. Ray stood motionless near the center of the workshop. The silence pressed around him. A good silence. A deep silence. The kind found in churches, or forests, or places where somebody had poured years of their life into something meaningful. His gaze drifted across the workshop, then stopped. Near the far wall stood a large drafting table. Beside it sat a leather-bound journal, and beyond the journal hung a framed photograph. Uncle Eddie, much younger, standing beside one of the finished tables, smiling. For the first time since the funeral, Ray felt something shift inside his chest. Not grief. Not yet. Something closer to wonder. Because one question suddenly towered above every other. If this was what waited behind the wall, then what else had Uncle Eddie spent a lifetime hiding? Across the room, Koda stopped beside the drafting table. His ears lifted, his nose touched the edge of the wood. Then he looked back at Ray, waiting once again, as if the biggest secret in the room still hadn't been found. Ray crossed the workshop slowly. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. Sunlight streamed through the high skylight and painted long rectangles across the polished furniture. Everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of patience. Years of it, maybe decades. The dining table nearest the entrance had joints so precise they were nearly invisible. The rocking chair beside it moved with a touch of one finger. A walnut bookshelf stood against the wall, taller than Ray, its shelves perfectly aligned. Nothing looked mass-produced. Nothing looked rushed. Whoever had built these pieces cared about every detail. Ray stopped beside the drafting table. Koda remained there, nose working the edge of the wood. The dog seemed interested in something, but not urgent. Not yet. Ray picked up the leather-bound journal first. The cover was dark with age. Its corners had softened from handling. A single set of initials had been stamped into the leather. ECHC. Ray frowned. Those weren't his uncle's initials. He opened the cover. The first page contained a pencil sketch, a small side table. Measurements filled the margins. Wood types, joinery notes, finishing instructions. The handwriting belonged to Uncle Eddie. Ray recognized it immediately. Steady, neat, deliberate. He turned another page, then another. The journal stretched back years. Every entry documented a different piece of furniture. Tables, cabinets, beds, desks, chairs. Some pages contained detailed drawings. Others recorded sales, dates, locations, amounts. Ray's eyes stopped on one number. $12,000. He looked again. A handcrafted writing desk, sold, $12,000. The next page showed another sale, $18,500. The next, $22,000. The next, $26,000. Ray lowered the journal slightly. The workshop suddenly felt different. Much different. His uncle hadn't been building furniture as a hobby. Nobody earned money like this from a hobby. He turned pages faster. The sales continued. Year after year, thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, always signed beneath the sketches with the same name. E.C. Hollow Creek. The name stirred something in the back of Ray's memory. He couldn't place it. Not immediately. Then he remembered. 5 years earlier. A waiting room at the VA clinic in Casper. A woodworking magazine someone had left behind. An article about a furniture maker whose pieces sold to collectors across the country. The headline had read, "The Mystery of E.C. Hollow Creek." The craftsman never gave interviews, never attended exhibitions, never appeared in photographs. Nobody knew who he was. Collectors argued online about his identity. Some believed he lived in Oregon. Others claimed Montana. One article suggested he had already died. Ray stared at the journal, then at the workshop surrounding him. No, the word escaped before he realized he had spoken. Koda lifted his head. Ray looked around again. The furniture, the craftsmanship, the prices, the journal, his uncle. A laugh escaped him, not because it was funny, because it was impossible. The quiet old man who wore the same flannel jacket for 10 years, The man who drove a truck older than most college graduates. The man who bought coffee with exact change. That man had spent decades creating furniture famous enough to be discussed nationwide. And nobody knew. Not Brandon, not Cheryl, not Melissa, not even Ray. Especially not Ray. The realization settled slowly, like snow accumulating across a field. He walked toward one wall where several framed documents hung beneath glass. Certificates, exhibition catalogs, magazine clippings. His pulse quickened. One clipping showed a photograph of a handcrafted rocking chair. Ray recognized it immediately. The exact chair sitting 20 feet away. The caption beneath the photograph read, "See Hollow Creek Collection. Estimated auction value, $31,000. Ray turned and stared at the chair. $31,000. For a chair. A strange mixture of admiration and disbelief crossed his face. The old man had hidden an entire life, not because he had to, because he wanted to. The workshop suddenly felt less like a room and more like a confession, one nobody was supposed to hear until now. Hours passed without Ray noticing. He continued reading, continued exploring. Each discovery revealed another layer of a man he thought he knew. Outside, afternoon sunlight shifted. Golden now. The mountains beyond the skylight glowed softly. Koda wandered quietly among the furniture, never straying far from Ray. The dog eventually returned to the drafting table. Again, the same place and the same corner. This time he pressed his nose beneath the edge, sniffed, paused, sniffed again. Ray noticed. "What is it?" Koda pawed lightly at the floor. Not enough to scratch, just enough to draw attention. Ray closed the journal. Something had captured the dog's interest twice. That meant something. Koda wasn't distracted by random things. The dog lowered his head again, following a scent, tracing it upward, toward one specific drawer built into the side of the drafting table. Ray slowly approached. The drawer looked ordinary. No lock, no markings, nothing unusual. Yet Koda remained focused on it. The same way he'd focused on the hidden wall, the same way he'd focused on the storage rack. Ray rested a hand on the drawer handle. A cool breeze drifted through the workshop. Somewhere overhead, the solar system hummed quietly. For reasons he couldn't explain, his heartbeat accelerated. Because if Koda was right again, then the greatest secret in this room might not be the furniture, or the money, or the famous name hidden behind decades of silence. It might be whatever his uncle had chosen to leave behind for one man alone. Slowly, Ray pulled the drawer open, and the smell of old paper drifted into the light. The drawer wasn't filled with blueprints. It wasn't filled with receipts. It wasn't filled with money. It held letters, dozens of them, neatly stacked, carefully organized. Each envelope was sealed. Each carried the same handwriting Ray had seen throughout the workshop. His uncle's. And every envelope had the same name written across the front. Ray Bennett. For a long moment, Ray simply stared. The workshop felt impossibly quiet. Even the faint hum of the solar batteries seemed distant now. Koda sat beside him, watching, waiting. Ray picked up the first envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. Across the front was written, "For Ray, age 30. His throat tightened. He wasn't 30 anymore. Not even close. Slowly, he opened it. The paper inside unfolded with a soft crackle. Ray. You won't read this for years, maybe decades. Today you turned 30. You spent your birthday helping me repair a fence after a storm. You didn't complain once. Most people don't realize how much a person reveals when they think nobody is paying attention. You always finish the work before talking about yourself. I admire that. Happy birthday. Eddie Ray stared at the page. His uncle had written it over 40 years ago. The fence. He remembered the fence. Rain, mud, a broken post, a cheap diner afterward. He remembered every detail, but he had never known Uncle Eddie remembered it too. Koda rested his head against Ray's leg. The old veteran folded the letter carefully and opened another. For Ray, age 45. Inside was a longer message. This one spoke about the year Ray's wife, Margaret, became ill. The year hospitals replaced vacations. The year life quietly changed direction. Your wife smiled every time she talked about you. You looked tired all year. You thought nobody noticed. I did. Take care of yourself too. The people carrying the heaviest loads often forget that. Ray stopped reading. The workshop blurred slightly. He removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, then stared toward the mountains visible through the skylight. Margaret had been gone 12 years. Cancer. Fast. Cruel. The kind of loss that rearranged a person's life without asking permission. For several minutes he said nothing. Neither did Koda. The dog simply stayed beside him. Present. Steady. The way he always had. Ray opened another letter. Then another. The years unfolded one envelope at a time. A younger version of himself emerged from the pages. The man before Iraq. The man after Iraq. The husband. The widower. The grandfather who never became a grandfather. The veteran trying to build a normal life while carrying memories nobody else could see. Then he found one marked, For Ray, after Iraq. His hands froze. Outside, a gust of wind brushed against the workshop walls. The sound reminded him of sand moving across metal. For an instant, the present slipped away. Heat, dust, engines idling, rotor blades chopping the air above a forward operating base, a radio crackling with clipped voices, a convoy briefing, someone laughing, someone who never came home. Ray's jaw tightened. He opened the letter. The handwriting looked exactly the same. Steady. Calm. Ray, you came back different. You think nobody notices because you don't talk about it. You sit facing doors. You wake up before sunrise. You scan parking lots before getting out of your truck. You pretend it's habit. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. You survived things most people cannot imagine. Don't spend the rest of your life apologizing for that. There is nothing weak about carrying weight. The strongest men I have known carried it quietly. I'm proud of you, Eddie. The words hit harder than Ray expected. His fingers tightened around the page. Across the room, sunlight shifted. Dust floated through the beams of light. The workshop remained silent. But something inside Ray felt less alone than it had in years, because Uncle Eddie had seen it. Not the medals, not the stories, not the version people thanked for his service at grocery stores. The real thing, the sleepless nights, the memories, the constant alertness, the parts nobody talked about. Ray swallowed hard, then reached for another envelope. This one carried no age, no date. Only 3 words. For Ray. Recently. His heartbeat quickened. He opened it. The paper inside was newer than the others, written only a few years earlier. Ray. If you're reading this, then I was right. You came. You opened the garage, and Koda found the workshop. Because if there is one thing I've learned, it's that dogs often understand people better than people understand themselves. You think you've been forgotten. You think the world stopped paying attention when things became difficult. You are wrong. I noticed everything. The sentence seemed to echo through the room. Ray read it again and again. I noticed everything. Not just once, not just recently. For decades. The old veteran lowered the letter slowly. His vision blurred. He looked away, toward the furniture, toward the skylight, toward anywhere except the page in his hands. But it didn't help. The tears came anyway, quietly, without warning. The first since Uncle Eddie's funeral, maybe longer. Koda immediately stood. The dog moved closer, then gently rested his head on Ray's knee. No barking, no whining, just presence. Ray placed one hand on the dog's neck. The thick fur felt warm beneath his fingers. Neither moved for a long time. Eventually his breathing steadied. The workshop remained silent around them. A lifetime hidden behind a wall. A lifetime of furniture. A lifetime of letters. And somehow the letters mattered most. When Ray finally looked back into the drawer, he noticed one last envelope lying beneath the others. Smaller. Different. The handwriting was larger. More deliberate. Almost as if his uncle had wanted to make sure it would never be overlooked. Across the front were 7 words. Look beneath the drafting table. Ray stared at the message, then slowly turned his head toward the massive drafting table beside him. Koda followed his gaze. The dog stood up immediately, as if he already knew exactly where they were going next. Ray slid the letters back into the drawer one by one. He handled them carefully. Not because they were fragile, because they felt alive. Each page carried a version of Uncle Eddie he had never known existed. A version that had been watching, listening, remembering. When the final envelope was safely tucked away, Ray rose from the drafting chair. Koda was already standing beside the table, tail still, eyes fixed, waiting. The afternoon light had shifted lower through the skylight. Long shadows stretched across the workshop floor. For a brief moment, the room felt less like a hidden workshop and more like a place suspended outside time. Ray crouched beside the drafting table. The furniture was heavy, handcrafted, built to last longer than the man who made it. He ran his fingers beneath the frame. Smooth wood, solid supports. Nothing obvious. Then he noticed something. A brass latch hidden underneath the right side. Tiny, almost invisible. The kind of detail nobody would notice unless they were looking for it. Ray pulled it. A soft click answered. Part of the lower panel shifted inward. Not enough to reveal anything. Just enough. He leaned closer. A narrow compartment had been built inside the drafting table itself. Inside rested a long wooden box. Nothing more. No gold. No stacks of cash. Just a box. Ray carefully removed it. The wood felt polished by years of handling. On the lid, burned into the grain with a branding iron, were 2 simple words. For Ray. The old veteran stared at them for several seconds, then slowly opened the lid. Inside were more letters, but these were different. Thicker, longer, some sealed, some tied together with faded leather cord. At the very top sat a folded sheet of paper. Ray unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ray. If you found this box, then Koda did his job. I always trusted dogs more than locks. The corner of Ray's mouth twitched. That sounded exactly like Uncle Eddie. He kept reading. Everything important is not hidden in money. Money disappears. People spend it, fight over it, lose it. The things that matter stay. Read these when you're ready. Not before, not after. When you're ready. Eddie Ray lowered the paper. The workshop grew quiet again. Outside, somewhere beyond the hills, a hawk cried across the valley. Koda settled beside him. The dog pressed against his leg, close enough to feel, close enough to remind him he wasn't alone. Ray reached for the first bundle. The leather cord came loose easily. The top letter was dated 21 years earlier, the year after Iraq. His stomach tightened. He unfolded the page. The memories arrived before he even finished the first paragraph. The heat, the dust, the endless beige horizon, a convoy leaving the wire before sunrise, the metallic smell of equipment baking under desert sun, a radio crackling across channels, someone calling out coordinates, someone laughing in the seat behind him, someone who never made it home. Ray stopped reading. His jaw tightened. The workshop disappeared for a second. Not completely. Just enough. A helicopter rotor seemed to echo somewhere inside his memory. Thump, thump, thump. His breathing changed. The old familiar reaction. The one that arrived without permission. The one that arrived even after all these years. Then he felt fur against his hand. Koda. The dog had moved closer. Not excited. Not worried, just present. Ray exhaled slowly. The workshop returned. The mountains, the sunlight, the smell of sawdust. He looked down and scratched behind Koda's ears. The dog leaned into it. Steady. Always steady. Ray continued reading. The letter wasn't about Iraq. Not really. It was about afterward. The silence afterward, the nights afterward, the people who thanked him without understanding, the people who avoided asking questions, and Uncle Eddie had noticed all of it. You sit with your back against walls. You leave restaurants if the noise gets too loud. You sleep lighter than anyone I know. People think you're quiet. You're not. You're listening. Ray stared at those words. Listening. That was exactly it. Not fear, listening. Always listening. Always tracking exits. Always measuring distance. Always noticing movement. The habits had become part of him, like breathing. The next letter spoke about Margaret. The one after that spoke about the months following her funeral. The next described a visit Eddie never mentioned. A day Ray had spent fixing a broken fence while pretending everything was fine. The details were impossible. Every small thing, every gesture, every silence, every struggle. Uncle Eddie had seen them all. A strange ache settled inside Ray's chest. Not painful, not entirely. More like a door opening somewhere deep inside. One that had been locked for years, maybe decades. The sun dipped lower. The workshop glowed amber. Dust drifted through shafts of light. The furniture stood silent around him, witnesses to a lifetime of work, a lifetime of attention, a lifetime of love hidden behind ordinary conversations. Ray opened another letter, then another. Hours passed. Neither he nor Koda moved much. The world outside continued without them. The mountains darkened. The sky turned orange, then purple. Eventually, Ray reached the final letter in the box. No date, no age, just his name. He opened it carefully. The page inside held only a few lines. Ray. You spent years believing nobody noticed. Nobody saw. Nobody understood. You were wrong. I saw everything. The words struck harder than all the others combined. Simple. Plain. True. Ray lowered the page. For a long time he stared across the workshop, at the rocking chair, at the tables, at the shelves. At 40 years of work created by a man who never needed applause. The tears came quietly. No sobbing. no collapse. Just tears. The kind that arrive when a person finally stops carrying something alone. Koda rested his head on Ray's knee. Again. Just as he had before. The old veteran placed a hand on the dog's neck. Neither moved. The workshop grew darker around them, and for the first time in years, Ray Bennett felt something unfamiliar. Not relief, not happiness. Something deeper. The feeling that maybe he had never been as invisible as he thought. Then Koda suddenly lifted his head. His ears turned toward the far corner of the workshop, toward the heavy steel safe built into the floor beneath a row of cabinets. The dog stood, slowly, deliberately, and began walking toward it, as if another secret was waiting. The steel safe sat beneath a row of built-in cabinets along the far wall. It wasn't large, maybe 2 feet square. Heavy. Industrial. The kind of safe designed to outlive the building around it. Koda stopped beside it and sat down. His eyes lifted toward Ray, expectant, patient, the same look he had given beside the hidden wall, the same look he had given beside the drawer. Ray walked across the workshop. The last light of day slanted through the skylight overhead. The safe door carried a small brass plate. No name, no serial number, just 3 engraved letters. ECHEC, Hollow Creek. Ray crouched. The handle wouldn't move. Locked. For a moment he searched for a keyhole. Nothing. Then he noticed a folded piece of paper taped beneath the cabinet. His uncle's handwriting. Of course. Ray, you always were better at finding things than I was. Try the date you first brought Koda home. Eddie Ray laughed quietly. The sound echoed through the workshop. Still giving orders. Koda's tail thumped once against the floor. Ray entered the date. The lock clicked immediately. The heavy door opened. Inside sat several neatly organized folders, a metal cash box, and a thick leather binder. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked hidden in panic. Everything had been placed there deliberately, as if Uncle Eddie had expected this exact moment. Ray lifted the binder first. The cover read, Hollow Creek Holdings. His pulse quickened. He opened it. Page after page documented furniture sales, exhibition agreements, collector purchases, licensing contracts, insurance valuations. The numbers grew larger the deeper he read. 10,000, 20,000, 35,000, 48,000. The workshop suddenly felt smaller. Not because of the money, because of the scale. The quiet old man everyone overlooked had built something substantial, something lasting. Ray turned another page. A notarized document appeared. Then another. Then another. Each one connected to the name E.C. Hollow Creek. The business, the designs, the intellectual property. Everything. His eyes stopped on a final page. Ownership transfer. Beneath it sat his own name. Ray Bennett. The document had been signed years ago. His uncle's signature. Witness signatures. Notary stamps. All complete. All legal. All real. Ray lowered the binder slowly. What were you doing all these years? The question disappeared into the silence. Koda remained beside him, watching. The old veteran opened the metal cash box next. Inside rested several bank documents, a passbook, account records, certificates. His breathing slowed. Years in the military had taught him not to react before understanding the full picture. One document listed the current balance of a joint account. Ray read the number once, then again, then a third time. $392,000. For several seconds his mind refused to process it, not because it was impossible, because it was completely unexpected. He looked back through the records. The deposits stretched across decades, furniture sales, royalties, private commissions, each one added carefully, methodically, year after year, a lifetime of work, a lifetime of discipline. And somehow his name had been added to the account years earlier, long before the will, long before the funeral, long before the garage became his. Ray sat back against a cabinet. The workshop seemed unusually quiet. Outside, the sun finally disappeared behind the mountains. The skylight darkened. Blue shadows filled the room. His uncle had spent years building this. Not for himself, for Ray. The realization settled heavily. Not like a burden, like responsibility. A few minutes later, Koda suddenly stood. His ears rotated toward the workshop entrance. Ray noticed immediately. The dog wasn't barking. That was what concerned him. Koda only stayed silent when he was listening carefully. Ray closed the safe. Every instinct sharpened, the same instincts that had followed him home from Iraq. The workshop disappeared. The mountains disappeared. For a moment there was only awareness, sound, movement, distance. He stood quietly, listening. Nothing. Then, a faint metallic clink from outside, near the garage. Koda moved toward the hidden doorway. Slow, controlled. Ray followed. No sudden movements, no unnecessary noise. Years earlier, someone had taught him a simple lesson. Move fast when necessary. Move quietly when possible. At the doorway, he stopped, listened again. Another sound. A boot against gravel. Someone was outside, not passing by, not driving past. Walking. Ray extinguished the workshop lights. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. The only illumination came from fading evening light near the garage entrance. Koda remained perfectly still, waiting. Ray carefully moved closer to the front of the garage. Every board creak sounded louder now. Every breath seemed amplified. He reached the edge of the doorway and looked through a narrow gap. A pickup truck sat across the road. Engine off, lights off, parked beneath a stand of trees. The vehicle looked familiar. Very familiar. Ray narrowed his eyes. Even in the fading light, he recognized the dented rear bumper, the cracked taillight, Brandon's truck, the same truck from the lawyer's office, the same truck that had laughed at the $10 garage. Ray remained motionless. The truck sat there another minute, then 2, then 3. Finally, the engine started. Headlights flashed across the weeds. The vehicle turned around and disappeared down Willow Creek Road. Silence returned. Koda looked up at him. Ray stared after the truck long after it vanished. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous yet. Just wrong. Brandon didn't visit abandoned properties for no reason, especially not after dark. The old veteran looked back toward the hidden workshop, toward the safe, toward the documents, toward the account. Then he glanced again at the empty road. His uncle had hidden this place successfully for decades. Now someone else knew there might be something worth finding. And for the first time since opening the garage, Ray realized the secret wasn't buried anymore. Someone had started looking, and Koda had noticed it before he did. Ray barely slept that night. The RV sat behind the garage with its lights off. The mountains disappeared into darkness. A cold wind moved through the pines. Inside, Koda lay near the door, not asleep, resting. There was a difference. Ray knew because he was doing the same thing. At 1:14 a.m. he checked the road. At 2:03 he checked it again. At 3:27 a gust of wind rattled loose sheet metal somewhere down the valley. His eyes opened instantly. For a split second he saw another place. A convoy halted outside Fallujah. Night vision green. The distant crackle of a radio. Someone whispering. Possible movement. Then Wyoming returned. The RV, the mountains, the dog. Koda lifted his head, watching him. The old veteran sat up and rubbed a hand across his face. "Go back to sleep, buddy." Koda didn't. Neither did Ray. By sunrise, he had made a decision. He wasn't calling Brandon. He wasn't calling the sheriff. Not yet. Something felt off. People who had nothing to hide usually knocked on doors. They didn't park in the dark and watch from a distance. The next 2 days followed a pattern. Ray worked inside the hidden workshop. He cataloged documents, photographed records, made copies of the ownership paperwork. Every afternoon, Brandon's truck appeared somewhere nearby. Not always close, not always obvious. Sometimes parked at the old railroad crossing. Sometimes near the feedlot outside town. Always watching, always leaving when noticed. Ray never confronted him. He simply observed. A habit older than most of his scars. On the third evening, Koda noticed it first. The dog was lying near the workshop entrance when his head snapped upward. Ears forward. Eyes fixed. Ray immediately stopped what he was doing. No words. No questions. He trusted the dog. Koda moved toward the garage. Slowly. Carefully. The same way he had approached the hidden wall. Ray followed. Outside, twilight covered the valley. Long shadows stretched across the weeds. Nothing moved. At first. Then Koda froze. His nose pointed toward the backside of the property, near the tree line. Ray crouched. A faint impression marked the dirt. A boot print. Fresh. Not his. Not from earlier. He followed it. Another print. Then another. The trail circled behind the garage. Someone had walked the perimeter, studied the building, measured it. The realization tightened something inside him. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was preparation. Koda growled softly. The sound barely rose above the wind. Ray placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. The fur felt tense beneath his fingers. The sun disappeared. Darkness settled quickly. The mountains became silhouettes against a fading sky. Then headlights appeared, far down the road. Gone seconds later. Someone had killed them intentionally. Ray watched. Waited. Nothing. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The valley grew quiet again. Too quiet. At 9:41 p.m., Koda rose without warning. The dog moved toward the rear wall of the garage, every muscle suddenly alert. Ray's heartbeat slowed. Not faster. Slower. The way it always had before something important happened. A faint metallic scrape echoed outside. Someone was there. No doubt now. Ray extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. He moved silently toward a side window. Years ago, in another country, he had learned the value of patience. The first person to move wasn't always the first person to win. Outside, a shadow crossed the weeds. Human, moving carefully, stopping often, looking around. The figure reached the garage door, paused, then tried the handle. Locked. A flashlight beam flickered briefly. Gone. The figure moved along the wall, searching, looking for another way inside. Ray already knew who it was. The build, the walk, the truck, Brandon. Koda's growl deepened. Still quiet. Still controlled. The shadow disappeared around the rear corner of the building. A minute later came another sound. Wood shifting. The storage rack. The hidden wall. The realization hit instantly. Brandon had discovered something. Maybe not everything. But enough. Ray moved. Fast now. Across the workshop. Through the hidden doorway. toward the back of the garage. Koda surged ahead. The German Shepherd reached the corner first. A crash exploded through the darkness. A curse followed. Then the beam of a flashlight spun wildly. "Get away from me!" Brandon's voice. Panicked. Koda barked. Once. Loud enough to shake the building. Ray rounded the corner. Brandon stumbled backward beside the storage rack. One hand raised, the other holding a crowbar. The flashlight rolled across the floor. "Are you out of your mind?" Ray shouted. Brandon's face turned pale. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brandon bolted. He sprinted toward the open garage door. Koda launched after him. Fast. Too fast. The dog closed the distance instantly. Brandon jumped over a pile of scrap metal near the entrance. Koda followed. Then came a sharp yelp, a sound Ray had never heard before. Everything stopped. The dog tumbled sideways. Brandon disappeared into the darkness outside. His truck engine roared to life seconds later. Gravel sprayed, tires screamed. Then he was gone. Ray didn't chase him. He dropped to one knee beside Koda. The German Shepherd struggled to stand. Failed. A twisted piece of rusted sheet metal protruded from the scrap pile. Dark blood stained the fur on Koda's front leg. The dog's breathing had changed. Short, fast, painful. "No, no, no!" Ray's voice cracked. Koda looked up at him, still trying to rise, still trying to work, still trying to protect him. The old veteran carefully slid an arm beneath the dog's chest. Blood coated his sleeve. The nearest emergency veterinarian was 40 miles away, and every second suddenly mattered. Ray lifted Koda into his arms. The dog rested his head against Ray's shoulder, trusting him completely. Outside, the mountains stood silent beneath the stars. Inside the garage, 40 years of secrets no longer seemed important. There was only one thing that mattered now: getting Koda to a surgeon before it was too late. The drive to Cody felt longer than any convoy Ray had ever ridden. The mountains blurred past the windshield. Headlights carved tunnels through darkness. One hand gripped the steering wheel. The other rested on Koda's shoulder. The German Shepherd lay across a blanket on the passenger side, breathing hard, fighting, still fighting. "Stay with me, buddy." Koda's ears twitched. That was enough. The emergency veterinary clinic sat on the edge of town beside a 24-hour pharmacy. Ray barely remembered parking. One moment he was carrying Koda through the doors. The next he was standing beneath fluorescent lights while a surgical team rushed the dog into the back. Then there was nothing to do. Nothing except wait. The hardest mission of all. Hours passed. Coffee cooled untouched beside him. Outside, dawn slowly arrived. At 5:47 a.m., a veterinarian finally stepped into the waiting room. Dr. Harper. Gray hair, tired eyes, kind voice. The surgery went well. Ray didn't realize he had been holding his breath until that moment. The metal missed the joint, missed the artery too. He lost blood, but he's strong. Strong. The word fit. Nobody knew that better than Ray. "When can I see him?" "Soon." The veterinarian smiled slightly. "He's already trying to get up." Of course he was. Koda remained at the clinic for 3 days. Ray spent all 3 there, sleeping in his RV, walking hospital hallways, watching over the dog the way Koda had watched over him for years. On the 4th day, they returned to Elk Ridge. The workshop felt different now, less like a discovery, more like a responsibility. Koda moved carefully. A bandage wrapped around his front leg. A shaved patch showed beneath the fur. He limped slightly, but his eyes remained bright. The old warrior was still there. The following week brought another problem, then another, and another. First came Brandon. Not in person. Through a lawyer. A certified letter arrived at the garage. Then a second. Then a third. Questions about the estate. Questions about ownership. Questions about previously undisclosed assets. Ray read them all, then filed them neatly beside the documents from the safe. Uncle Eddie had expected this. That much was obvious now. The letters arrived because someone had talked. Maybe Brandon. Maybe someone at the county office. Maybe both. Secrets rarely stayed buried once money entered the story. A week later, Ray sat inside Thomas Hale's law office, the same office where everyone had laughed at the $10 garage. This time, nobody laughed. Thomas adjusted his glasses and examined the paperwork spread across his desk. The ownership transfer, the account documents, the Hollow Creek records, the letters, the workshop inventory. When he finished reading, he leaned back in his chair. "Your uncle prepared for this, I've noticed." Thomas nodded. He prepared very thoroughly. Outside the office window, snow clouds gathered over distant mountains. The first winter storm of the season was moving in. "What happens now?" Ray asked. Thomas folded his hands. "Now they challenge the will." Ray wasn't surprised. They think Uncle Eddie wasn't competent. They know he was. Thomas tapped one of the documents. But proving otherwise is easier than accepting reality. The lawyer paused, then reached into a folder. "There is something else." Ray looked up. Thomas slid a document across the desk. A notarized filing dated 3 years before Eddie's death. The paper looked ordinary. The implications weren't. Ray read it once, then again. His eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "A codicil." Thomas smiled slightly. A very detailed one. The room grew quiet. Ray continued reading. "Every asset connected to E.C. Hollow Creek. Every design. Every account. Every piece of furniture. Every trademark. Every future royalty. Everything. Specifically assigned. Specifically protected. Specifically transferred." To Ray Bennett. 3 years before Uncle Eddie died. Long before the illness. Long before the funeral. Long before anyone expected an inheritance fight. Thomas watched him carefully. "Your uncle hired another attorney to prepare it." "Why not you?" He didn't want anyone local to know. That sounded exactly like Eddie. Quiet. Patient. 3 steps ahead. Ray stared at the document. The old man had built more than furniture. He had built defenses, walls, protections, contingencies. The same way a veteran prepared fallback positions before needing them. The same way someone protected something valuable. Outside, snow began falling. Large flakes drifted across Main Street. The mountains vanished behind a white curtain. Thomas tapped another folder. "There's also a sealed letter." Ray looked up. "A letter? Addressed to the family." Thomas nodded. Instructions were very specific. Ray already knew. Uncle Eddie had been planning this conversation for years, maybe decades. The lawyer placed the envelope on the desk. The handwriting was unmistakable. Strong, steady, patient, just like the man himself. "What's in it?" Thomas smiled faintly. "I haven't read it." The envelope remained between them. Silent. Waiting. Outside, snow continued falling. Back at the workshop, Koda slept beside the wood stove. The dog's injured leg twitched occasionally as he dreamed. Inside the hidden room, 40 years of craftsmanship waited quietly beneath skylights and timber beams. And now another battle was approaching. Not one fought overseas, not one fought with weapons. A family battle, The kind Uncle Eddie had predicted long ago, the kind he had spent years preparing for. Ray picked up the sealed letter, turned it over once, then slid it back across the desk. When do they arrive? Thomas already knew who he meant. Friday. 3 days away. Ray nodded. Snow tapped softly against the window. The old veteran looked toward the mountains hidden beyond the storm, then toward the envelope. Somewhere inside those pages waited words certain people never wanted to hear, and 3 days later, they would hear every single one. Friday arrived beneath a sky the color of steel. Fresh snow covered Elk Ridge. The sidewalks were white. The rooftops were white. Even the mountains seemed quieter beneath winter's first blanket. Ray parked outside Thomas Hale's office just after 9. Koda sat beside him. The dog's leg was healing. The limp remained. But the veterinarian had removed the bandages 2 days earlier. A pale scar now crossed the fur above his paw. The wound would always be there. A reminder. Ray scratched behind his ears. You ready? Koda looked at him, then nudged the truck door with his nose. Ready enough. Inside the office, everything looked exactly as it had on the day of the will reading. The same chairs, the same desk, the same framed certificates on the wall. Only the mood had changed. Brandon sat near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. His mother, Cheryl, sat beside him. Melissa occupied the chair nearest the door. Nobody smiled. Nobody offered greetings. Thomas Hale entered carrying several folders. The sealed letter rested on top. The room fell silent. Ray took the same chair he had occupied weeks earlier. Koda settled beside him. The dog lowered himself carefully onto the carpet. His injured leg stretched forward. Brandon noticed the scar immediately. His eyes lingered there, then moved away. Thomas sat down, adjusted his glasses, opened the first folder. The estate review is complete. Nobody spoke. The codicil has been verified. Thomas placed copies in front of everyone. The papers slid across polished wood. The sound seemed unusually loud. Brandon read first. His face hardened, then changed, then hardened again. Cheryl took longer. Melissa covered her mouth halfway through the second page. The codicil was clear, unmistakably clear. Every asset connected to E.C. Hollow Creek, every design, every workshop tool, every royalty, every account, every piece of intellectual property, everything belonged to Ray Bennett. No loopholes, no ambiguity, no opening for interpretation. The room remained silent. Finally, Brandon spoke. He manipulated him. Thomas didn't even look up. The document was signed 3 years before Mr. Bennett's death. He was old. He was competent. The medical records confirm that. Brandon stopped. The silence returned. Outside, snow drifted past the office windows. Slow, steady, beautiful. Thomas folded his hands. There's one final item. Everyone knew what he meant. The letter. The sealed envelope sat in the center of the desk, waiting. Ray watched Thomas break the seal. The paper inside unfolded slowly. Several pages. Handwritten. Uncle Eddie's familiar handwriting filled every line. Thomas began reading. The room seemed to shrink to my family. If you're hearing this letter, then I'm gone and you've probably discovered things I never discussed while I was alive. Before I say anything else, understand this. I love every one of you. The words landed gently, not as an attack, not as an accusation, as truth. Thomas continued. For years I watched all of you build your lives. Some of you moved away. Some of you became successful. Some of you stayed busy. I was proud of all of it. Brandon shifted slightly. Cheryl stared at the table. The letter continued. Then the tone changed. Not angry, not bitter, simply honest. When my roof leaked, Ray came. When my truck broke down, Ray came. When winter buried the road, Ray came. When doctors told me things I didn't want to hear, Ray drove me there anyway. Thomas paused briefly, then kept reading. I don't write this to shame anyone. Life is complicated. Distance is real. Responsibilities are real. But facts are also real. The room felt colder. Snow tapped softly against the glass. Ray said nothing. Neither did Koda. Thomas turned the page. During my final years, many people told me they cared. One person consistently showed me. His name is Raymond Bennett. Brandon looked away. Melissa wiped her eyes. Cheryl sat motionless. The letter continued. The workshop belongs to Ray because he would actually walk inside and look. The furniture belongs to Ray because he understands what it costs to build something one day at a time. The account belongs to Ray because he never once asked about money. Not once. Thomas lowered his voice slightly. The final section carried unusual weight. If you're angry, I understand. If you're disappointed, I understand that too. But before you blame Ray, ask yourself one question. When was the last time you sat beside me with no expectation of receiving anything in return? Nobody answered. Nobody could. The office grew silent enough to hear the heating vents. Thomas read the final lines. The people who stay deserve the most, not because they ask, because they stay. I love you all. Eddie Bennett, the last word faded into silence. Nobody moved. Nobody argued. That was the strange thing. The letter contained no insults, no cruelty, no revenge. Only facts. And facts were difficult to fight, especially when everyone in the room already knew they were true. Several minutes passed. Brandon finally stood. The anger had disappeared. Something else had replaced it. Something smaller. He buttoned his jacket, just like people did when they needed something to do with their hands. I'm not filing anything. Thomas nodded. I figured. Brandon glanced toward Ray, then toward Koda. The scar on the dog's leg seemed to hold his attention. For a moment, Ray thought he might apologize. Instead, Brandon simply lowered his eyes, then left. The door closed behind him. Melissa followed soon after. Then Cheryl, one by one. Gone. No arguments, no lawsuits, no dramatic speeches. Only silence. The kind silence leaves behind when truth has finally been spoken aloud. Eventually, only Ray, Koda, and Thomas remained. The lawyer carefully gathered the documents, then reached into his briefcase. There was one more envelope. Ray looked up. Thomas slid it across the desk, smaller than the others, his name written on the front. Nothing else. For Ray. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ray stared at it. His pulse quickened. Thomas smiled faintly. He wanted you to receive this after everything else was settled. Outside, the snowfall continued. The mountains beyond town had vanished completely beneath clouds. Ray picked up the envelope. The paper felt familiar beneath his fingers. Warm, somehow. Personal. Important. He looked toward Koda. The dog raised his head immediately, as if he understood. The old veteran slipped the envelope into his jacket pocket, then stood. Because somehow he already knew where he needed to read it. Not here. Not in town. Not in a lawyer's office. Back at the workshop. Back where everything had begun. back where one loyal dog had scratched at a wall and changed both of their lives forever. Snow-covered Willow Creek Road when Ray returned to the garage. The mountains stood beneath a pale winter sky. Smoke drifted from distant chimneys. The world felt quieter than it had in years. Koda stepped down from the truck carefully. The scar on his front leg showed when he walked. A permanent mark, a reminder of what loyalty sometimes cost. The German Shepherd limped toward the garage door, then stopped, looked back, waiting. Ray smiled. Yeah, me too. The hidden workshop greeted them with familiar silence. Sunlight filtered through the skylight. The furniture stood exactly where Uncle Eddie had left it. The smell of sawdust lingered in the air. A place built one careful day at a time. Ray sat in the rocking chair nearest the drafting table. Koda lowered himself beside him. The final envelope rested in his hands. For several minutes he simply looked at it. Not because he was afraid, because he already knew there would never be another letter after this one. Slowly he opened it. The paper unfolded. The handwriting was steady, familiar. Ray, if you're reading this, then everything happened the way I hoped it would. You found the workshop. You found the letters. You found the truth. And Koda found everything else. The old veteran smiled despite himself. He continued reading. You spent a long time believing you had lost your place in the world. Maybe that started after Iraq. Maybe after Margaret died. Maybe after you lost the house. I don't know. What I do know is this. You never stopped showing up for other people. Not once. The words settled quietly. Like snowfall. You showed up for me. You showed up for your friends. You showed up for people who couldn't repay you. That matters more than money ever will. Ray paused. His eyes drifted across the workshop. 40 years of craftsmanship. 40 years of patience. 40 years of hidden purpose. Then he read the final paragraph. The people who stay deserve the most. Not because they earn it. Not because they ask for it. Because they're still there when everyone else leaves. This workshop was never meant to save your life. It was meant to help you build another one. Love, Eddie. The letter ended there. No grand revelation. No final secret. No hidden fortune. Just truth. Simple. Honest. The way Eddie had always spoken. Ray folded the paper carefully, then sat quietly for a long time. Outside, winter moved across the valley. Inside, the workshop held its silence. A good silence, the kind that feels earned. Koda eventually rested his head on Ray's boot. The old veteran scratched behind the dog's ears. The scarred leg stretched comfortably across the floor. You were right. Koda's tail tapped once, as if he already knew. 1 year later, the sign appeared first, mounted above the garage entrance, hand-carved, simple, strong, Hollow Creek Veterans Workshop. The old garage nobody wanted had become something entirely different. The hidden workshop remained. But now the front room stayed open most Saturdays. Veterans arrived from across the county. Some were young, some were old. Some carried visible injuries. Others carried things no one could see. Nobody asked many questions. They didn't need to. They built things instead. Birdhouses, tables, shelves, rocking chairs. Sometimes conversations happened. Sometimes they didn't. Both were acceptable. Ray taught woodworking the same way Uncle Eddie had taught him patience. Quietly. One step at a time. The workshop grew. Word spread. A local lumber yard donated scrap wood. A church sponsored supplies. The county veterans office sent people looking for direction. One spring afternoon, a young Marine veteran named Tyler finished his first chair. The young man stood staring at it for nearly 10 minutes, not speaking, just looking. Ray recognized the expression. Pride, disbelief, relief. Tyler finally ran a hand across the wood. I didn't think I could still make something. Ray nodded. Most people can. Outside, sunlight washed across the mountains. The snow had long since melted. Fresh grass covered the hills. The world felt alive again. Later that evening, the workshop emptied. Vehicles disappeared down Willow Creek Road. The sounds of hammers and saws faded. Silence returned. Ray stepped outside. Koda followed. The German Shepherd moved slower these days. The injured leg still stiffened during cold mornings, but he remained at Ray's side, always. Together they crossed the property, past the workshop, past the old garage, toward the small cottage sitting behind the building. The cottage hadn't existed when Ray arrived, at least not in usable condition. The roof had leaked. The walls had sagged. The windows had been broken. Now it looked different. Warm light glowed through the curtains. A porch swing hung beneath the roofline. Inside stood furniture built by Uncle Eddie. The dining table, the rocking chair, the bookshelf, the writing desk. A home. Not borrowed, not temporary, not parked beside a highway. A home. Ray stopped at the porch steps. For a moment he looked back. The workshop sign caught the final sunlight. Beyond it rose the mountains. Steady, unmoving, beautiful. Koda sat beside him, the dog's scar visible beneath his fur, a permanent reminder of the day everything changed. Ray reached down and rested a hand on his neck. The German Shepherd leaned gently against him, the way he always had, the way he always would. For years, Ray had believed the most valuable thing hidden inside that garage might be money, or property, or a famous name. He understood now how wrong that was. The most valuable thing Koda had found wasn't hidden behind a wall, or inside a safe, or beneath a drafting table. It was proof. Proof that during all the years Ray thought he had become invisible, one man had been paying attention. One man had seen every sacrifice, every loss, every quiet act of loyalty. And because of that, a homeless veteran no longer felt forgotten. The porch light clicked on. Evening settled across the valley. Ray opened the front door. Koda rose and followed him inside. The door closed softly behind them, and for the first time in a very long time, neither of them had anywhere else they needed to be. The door closed softly behind them. If you believe loyalty is worth more than money, leave a simple one in the comments. If you've ever had a person, or a dog, who stayed by your side when life got hard, leave a 0. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to know which one you chose. And if Ray and Koda's journey meant something to you today, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. There are many more powerful stories waiting ahead. Stories of courage, second chances, forgotten heroes, and the incredible bond between people and the dogs who never give up on them. Until the next story, take care of yourself, take care of the people who stay, and never underestimate the value of being there for someone when it matters most. We'll see you in the next one.